What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're gonna be learning Databricks in under 2 hours. Now, for the past 5 weeks, we've been diving into Databricks, and in this video, we're just putting all that together so you can follow along really easily. We're gonna start by taking a quick walkthrough of Databricks and seeing everything that it has to offer. Then we're gonna start importing data, not just from a flat file, but also connecting to a data source. Then we're gonna start using their SQL Editor as well as their notebooks and visualizing data. After this, we'll be using their AI tools like Genie and their AI assistant. And finally, we'll be building a full project at the end. The best thing about all this is it is completely free. Databricks has something called the Databricks Free Edition. I will leave a link in the description. You can make an account by just using your email. That is it. So be sure to go and create your free account so you can follow along with this entire video because we have a lot of things that we are going to cover. With all that being said, I hope you learned a ton because Databricks is a fantastic platform. So let's jump right into it. Now, Databricks is an amazing platform. I've been using it for many years, and it's built on top of Apache Spark, which means it is very good at handling large amounts of data. It's designed for entire teams of data engineers, data analysts, data scientists to work with data collaboratively. So that means ingesting the data, analyzing the data, and visualizing data all in one place. In this lesson, we're gonna be diving into Databricks and look at some of the core functionality and features that Databricks Free Edition has to offer. And then in the next several lessons, we're gonna get really hands-on and start digging into these features and start building things out. With that being said, let's jump on my screen and get started. Before we jump into the platform itself, I just wanna show you that this is where you sign up. So I'm gonna have this link down below. So you can just click on it, you can create an account and you can sign in. There's no credit card information that they take. You just literally sign in and you are good to go. But on this page, you can sign up for the free edition or log in, which we'll log in just a second. But you can also learn a lot more about Databricks Free Edition and everything that they have to offer. You can see that they have built-in AI agents and they have AI built in, and that is something that we're gonna cover in this series. You can also visualize your data and create full dashboards. And of course, you can interact with your data with Python and SQL, either through notebooks or through a code editor. Let's go back up and let's go and sign up for the free edition. All we have to do is log in. You can do that with Google, with a Microsoft account, or just an email. I'm gonna sign in with my Google account. And all I have to do is say where I'm from. So this is Alex, we have the free edition, and I'm from the United States. Let's go ahead and click continue. And just like that, we are signed up for the Databricks Free Edition. It was about as seamless as it can possibly be. Now, there's a lot to cover. Databricks has so many different features. They have so many different things that you can do, from building interactive dashboards to writing SQL queries and sharing that with your team and being able to work with your team. You can even build AI agents. There is a lot of things that you can do. And some of this might be a little bit intimidating if you've never used a platform like this before. If you're used to just working in something like SQL or R or Tableau, it's a little bit more advanced than that. So there's a lot of things that they have that are all combined into one place. And so we're gonna walk through a lot of these things that you see on this left-hand side to see exactly what you can do in Databricks. Now I'm gonna start at the very top because this is a workspace. And a workspace is basically the place that you work and you can collaborate in as well. So you can give your teammates access to your workspace. So if you have data in here, if you have code in here, if you have visualizations, whatever it is, you can share that with them and they can get access to all of your work. Next, let's go to catalog. You can think of catalog as like a schema. So if you have a schema in a database, you're gonna have all of your tables and your views and your stored procedures and everything underneath it. And this is very similar. So if I go into a workspace, or if I go down here into the samples, we have different databases. And so we can click into these databases and we can look at all these different tables. And so this is where you're gonna have access to view all of your data and files and tables within Databricks. Next, let's take a look at jobs and pipelines. This is where we start getting into some automation. So here we have an ingestion pipeline, an ETL pipeline, and a job. And each of these does a slightly different thing. If you create an ingestion pipeline, that's gonna be like the extraction of the ETL process. You're extracting data to bring it in. Then we have our ETL pipeline, which is the entire process of transforming it, loading, and actually putting it into a table within Databricks. And then we have our jobs. So that's gonna orchestrate it. We're gonna be able to say, here's when we actually run these pipelines so that we can time it. We can do it, daily, weekly, monthly, whenever we want to run these pipelines. So we don't have any created, but when we do, they'll be down here at the bottom. Next, let's look at compute. Now, compute is very simple in the free edition because you don't have any options here. We just have our serverless starter warehouse. This is what you get for free with the free edition. Now, if you go to the full Databricks product, then you're going to be able to kind of customize your compute to your needs. But for this free edition, we have the owner, we have the size, which is a 2x small, and then we have whether it's active or not. Now, right now, we're not running anything. We're not looking at any tables. We're not running any queries. So it's not active at the moment. But the second that we open something up and start working with real data, it will activate this serverless compute and we'll be able to use it for free. One small nuance to this is there actually is one other type of compute, you just can't see it, and that's for when you run Python in a notebook. It's called a generic compute. It's just for that one specific use case. For the most part, you're going to be using this serverless compute, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Notice when I clicked on compute, it also took me right down here to the SQL warehouse. This is our SQL warehouse that we are using. Next, let's go down to the marketplace. Now, the marketplace is basically just, hey, here's a lot of companies that work with us, that we partner with, we have connectors to, and we have, partnerships with, and it allows you to work with them a lot easier. So here we go, partner connect integration. So if you want to connect to Fivetran, to Power BI, to Tableau, DBT, Prophecy, you can easily connect to these. I know at my previous job, I connected it with Power BI a lot. And so these are great connectors where you can just kind of search and you can see, hey, do they connect to this tool that we use? And most of the time they do have that connector. Now the marketplace has other things as well. If we come over here to products, we have things like tables or files, which is data. You can also search for models and notebooks and all sorts of other things. So you can come in here and we can search for files. And so these are all free resources and files that you can search for and use. If you can't find data here in the marketplace, you can always just go to something like Kaggle and get free data and bring that into Databricks as well. Now let's come over here and go to the SQL editor. You can see we have kind of these larger overarching sections up here, but then we have SQL, and then we have data engineering, then we have AI and machine learning. Right now we're in the SQL section. So right in here, we're able to come in and we're able to write SQL just like any other platform. The neat thing about this though is that they have AI integrated into it. It helps a lot with writing some of the base queries that you're gonna write. Now we're gonna have a whole lesson on Genie, and so we're gonna dive into that and see how you can generate code and do a lot of different things with Genie, which is their AI system within Databricks. And Genie just allows you to get insights from your data just using natural language. But you'll be able to write SQL right here in this editor, as well as have multiple tabs and choose what workspace you're working with in, and choose what workspace you are working in. Right now we're just on the default, but if you had different workspaces, you'd be able to just click on those and select where you want your queries to be pointed at. Next, let's take a look at our queries. So once we get in and we start developing all these queries, we want to save them. And organization is a big piece of that. I know that I used to have like 20, 30 different kind of queries that I was saving on my file explorer back in my old job. And then I started working in Databricks. I'm like, hey, I can just save those within this. And then I don't have to email someone my query and then they pull it up and copy and paste. Like it's all here within Databricks, which is really great. Next, let's go look at dashboards. Now, these are some sample dashboards, and we're gonna have a whole lesson on analyzing and visualizing data within Databricks. So we'll be able to build something like this. But let's click into one of these dashboards. Right here, it says my warehouse is starting. That's because it's connecting to the data to be able to visualize our data. So let's get rid of this filter really quick. So this is what our dashboard looks like, and you're able to create all these different visualizations. You're able to drill down into the data, and this is all connected to data that is already in Databricks. So it's all in one place. Next, let's go take a look at Genie, and they have a whole section just for this. And they also have an entire section that is just devoted to this warehouse. Now, this is something that a lot of platforms are trying to build to, but Databricks already has it, which is they have all the data, they have the ability to query and analyze and visualize data all in one place, but being able to use AI with it to get a lot of those things done faster. And so you can ask it questions and it's gonna prompt you because this is kind of a starter section. And you can ask it questions and it's going to run these queries and it's going to get you that information really quickly. In one of our future lessons, we're going to be diving into just Genie, focused only on what it can do, how it helps you analyze your data faster, and how it can be really useful to you as a user. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is alerts. Now, an alert is basically like a trigger. When a condition is met, it's going to do something. And so you can customize these alerts and set these conditions, and they'll email you or they'll message you when these conditions are true. Now, in this section up here, this is where we're going to be spending the majority of our time. There are other things like the job runs, which is where you can create your jobs, which is part of these jobs and pipelines. And then of course, the data ingestion as well, which allows you to connect to your data. So if you have a data source that you want to point at, maybe it's Google Analytics, you can just click on this and connect to your data. Or if you just want to upload a file, you can do that as well. Down here, we have our AI and machine learning section. So you can click on the playground. This is another area where you can interact with the AI within Databricks, and you can select some custom parameters as well as the prompts that you are using. We can also look at experiments. This is where you can build out AI agents and machine learning models, and you can actually test them out. And so this is a fantastic place where you can actually learn how to use a lot of these foundational models, and you can take the data and you can deploy it, and you can work through these issues and really learn hands-on how to work with them. Naturally, they're gonna have AI integrated into all of this, so you can work with the Databricks assistant to get help with all of your coding. So as you're going along, if you get stuck, you can always get help with your code. As I said before though, we are gonna be spending most of our time right up here. Of course, we'll need to ingest our data, but after that, we're gonna be spending a lot of our time visualizing, see how we can work with our data and how we can use their integrated AI to be able to do our work faster. At the end of this entire series, we'll be building a full project using a lot of the things that we're gonna be looking at in this series. I think building and getting hands-on is the best way to learn, so I cannot wait to get started on that. There are a lot of ways to work with data in Databricks, and we're gonna cover a lot of them in this lesson. We're gonna upload data like a CSV and a JSON file. Then we're gonna connect to an external data source, and we're gonna bring that data in. Then we're gonna see how we can actually use our data working in the SQL Editor as well as using a notebook. The best way to follow along is to create a Databricks account. I will leave a link in the description. It's Databricks free edition, so it is completely free. All you have to do is create an account and sign in, and you'll have access to everything. You don't have to put in a credit card at all. It is completely free, which is amazing. With all that being said, let's jump on my screen and get started. We are starting out fresh. We haven't uploaded any data or ingested any data into Databricks yet, so you are right where you need to be. Now, there's actually a lot of different ways that you can bring data into Databricks. Right now, we're in our workspace, but let's go over to our catalog and let's go into our workspace. Let's go into default. Right now, we have no data in our default workspace. Now, what we're gonna do is let's click into this default, and we're gonna come right over here and we can go to create. Now we have a few different options. These two are the only ones that are really relevant to what we're doing right now. So let's create a new volume here. And I'm just gonna call this YouTube series. And then I'm gonna go ahead and create this. Now you'll see right over here, under default, we now have this folder called YouTube series. If I click in this YouTube series, we can upload to this volume. So we can do that right here. We don't have to actually go outside of it or go to any of these other options. We just click on upload to this volume. So let's go ahead and click browse. And I have all these different files. Now I created these, they're very simple files. We're not getting crazy in this lesson, but I have a customers CSV and a customers JSON. So one's a CSV file, one's a JSON file. I also have orders CSV, orders JSON, products CSV, and products JSON. We're not gonna use all these, although I will have all these files in a GitHub. You can just find them in a link below, so you can download these exact files if you wanna work alongside me. But let's bring in the customers CSV. So I'm gonna click on this customers CSV, and you can see this is the destination path that we are using. Let's go ahead and upload this file. And very quickly, like in 1 second it took, we now have our customers CSV.csv. Now I just named it that, so if the .csv wasn't there, we'll still be able to see it. Let's click into the CSV really quickly. We have our customer ID, first name, last name, country, and sign up date. And then you can see our data is all separated by a comma. Now this data is just being stored as a file. This isn't actually being stored as a table. So you can see it just sits in here as a .csv. So if we go over to our files, it's gonna sit there as an actual CSV file. Now we can still query off of this data just as it is as a file. We don't actually have to have this in a table format. Let's come right over here and let's copy this path. And then we're gonna go down to our SQL editor and let's come over here to a SQL query. Now, if we want to access this data, we can say select everything, and then we'll say from, and I'm gonna put this path in here. I should be able to use backticks, just like this. And let's try running this. And actually I need to put CSV dot right here. Now let's try running this. And as you can see, we were able to read in our data without it actually being in a table. A CSV file is one of the easiest files to work with. It's just values that are separated by commas. And so when we do this, when we say CSV dot, and then we provide the path, we are reading in this data as if it is in a table. Now, if you come from just a SQL background, this may seem very unintuitive to you, and that's okay. Let's go back to our catalog, and we're gonna come over here to Workspace. We're gonna go to Default, and instead of going into our volume right here, we're gonna come back to our default. And so now we're gonna create a table. When we go to create a table, we're still using our serverless starter warehouse here, but now we have the ability to connect to a data source or to upload a specific file format. Let's go ahead and click Browse. We just uploaded the customers CSV, but let's go down to the orders JSON because JSON is a totally different format. Let's go ahead and open this up. It's going to read in that JSON and make it tabular, which is fantastic because JSON by definition is not a structured format. And so being able to read in that data really easily and then put it into columns and rows is very helpful. So now we're going to do a create a new table. We can name this table anything we want. I'm just going to get rid of this JSON because once it reads it in, it's like a table anyways. So we're going to keep it as orders here. Then we're going to create this table. Now you'll notice over here, under our default, we have tables and we have volumes. So they are separated out because they're two totally different things. One is going to be storing different files in kind of a folder format. And then one is the tables underneath our default workspace. So let's come down here to orders. And that's actually right over here. So now under our orders, we can see customer ID, order date, order ID, product ID, quantity, and total amount. We can get a little bit of metadata on this file. And if we come up here, we can come here and just create a query. So let's click on create query. It's going to open up a new query in here. And now we are just selecting everything from our orders table. It's already hitting off of our default schema in our workspace. So we don't have to start doing, workspace, default orders. We don't have to have all that. You can, but I'm just gonna hit Control Z here. Let's go ahead and run this. And now we can see all of our data in this really pretty view. So far we've ingested a CSV file and we just did that as a CSV file. We were still able to read that data in, which is really fantastic, but we're also able to just create tables and then read that data in like any other SQL database. But now let's come over here to data ingestion. There's a lot of different ways you can access data that is not just sitting in a file. Right off the bat, we have our Databricks connectors, things like Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, Google Analytics, Azure SQL Server. These are a lot of the things that I've used in my actual work. Almost all companies are gonna have at least one of these, and so connecting to that data source, bringing it in is really common. We can also bring in data from a file like we did before, or create a table from Amazon S3, and then we have our Fivetran connectors right down at the bottom. I know personally, I've worked at different companies, I've consulted with companies, they use Google Drive as like their store of information. That's where they keep everything. So let's go over here to Google Drive and I'm gonna actually connect this. So I'm gonna say, I wanna put it in my workspace. Let's go ahead and click next. Really quickly, I have a file over here, orders csv.csv. It's sitting in a Google Drive. So that's what we're gonna go and try to connect to. Let's go ahead and click next. This is my email that I'm using for this Google Drive. We're gonna connect this to Fivetran. Since this is a new account for Fivetran, I need to create a password, so I'm gonna do that really quick. We're gonna come right down here and we're gonna go to share. And all we have to do is make sure that this is not restricted. So we're gonna say anyone with this link, which means Fivetran as well. And then we're going to copy this link and put it in our folder URL. Let's go ahead and save and test this. And it looks like our connection test passed. Let's go ahead and click continue. And now all we're gonna do is sync our data. We'll start the initial sync and it should be very quick because I do not have much data in this folder. So it looks like our connection was successful. Let's come over here to our schema. Our one file that we have in our Google folder is synced up, so we should be good to go. Now let's come back to our Databricks. Let's come right over here and we're gonna go into our catalog. We're gonna go into our workspace. And now we have default and we also have Google Drive. Let's click on our Google Drive and we have this orders CSV. And you'll notice that we now have it in here as a table. let's go ahead and create a query for this so we can look at our data. So now we have workspace.google Drive is connecting to a different schema. So we have select everything from orders CSV. Let's run this. And now we have our data. It also adds this in, which is 5tran synced, which is a really, really useful column because if you're syncing this data consistently, you really want to know when that data gets put into this table. I promise you, that's really helpful that they put that in there. And then we have all of our data that we had. And so that's how we can connect to outside data. In this case, we use 5tran, but sometimes you'll just do a direct connection depending on your data source. Now this SQL editor works like any other SQL editor. You're gonna be able to make joins and aggregations and all sorts of different things, but there is a different way to interact with your data. Let's come right over here. Let's go to new. We can also go and use a notebook. We can add code, we can add text. You can also use an AI assistant to help you with these things. So we have markdown file right here, and I can say, this is my first text right here. And then I have my code down here. So I can start writing and typing my code. Now I can specify right here whether I want it to be SQL, Scala, R, or Python. So for this notebook, you can use any of these. In this cell right here, I have Python, but let's add another one and I can use SQL in the next one. And then in the next one, I could use R. And so you don't have to just use one, you can use multiple. Now, it depends on what you're doing, whether you want to use a SQL editor or you want to come in here and use a notebook. When I'm just kind of querying data, I'm just looking at it, I'm not doing a lot of transformations, I don't need a big programming language, I'm just querying the data. I'm going to be using a SQL editor right here most of the time. And I can always save these queries and I can pass them along. But if I'm really digging in and I need to be able to break things out and leave notes and I'm going to share this with my team, a notebook is kind of the way to go. So let's look at SQL really quick. We already have a query for this, albeit a very simple query. But let's come over here and let's run this SQL query right here. So let's go ahead and run this. And so now if we scroll down, we're going to be able to see our data just like we did in the SQL editor. But now let's go write the same thing, but in Python. In order to do that, let's come up here, and this is already in Python. So we'll just say spark.table, and we need to read in the appropriate table, and all that is orders. And let's go ahead and run this. And it is reading it in as a data frame. Let's call this data frame. And let's come right down here and we'll say display data frame. And let's run this. And now we're going to get our data in a table just like before. Of course, with this, it's going to save this data, but you can always come in here and you can rename and export it and you can put it into Git. You can share this with your friends because all your friends really care about your notebooks that you are writing, or you can create a new notebook and start from scratch. But this is a totally different way to interact with your data in Databricks. This is where most of your work is going to be done. It's right here querying data, whether it's a SQL query or over here in a notebook writing a bunch of code, whether it's in Scala or Python or R or SQL itself. Now, I hope that was really helpful because in the next lesson, we're going to be analyzing data with SQL and then also building out visualizations in Databricks. Now, in the last lesson, we looked at the SQL editor as well as notebooks. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at some data. We're going to be analyzing that data, and then we're going to be putting it into a dashboard and creating different visualizations. This is actually the dashboard that we're going to be creating in this lesson. And I know what you're thinking, Alex, you put the exact same visualization twice. That makes no sense, but it will make sense once we get to it in the lesson. I highly recommend following along. All you have to do is have a Databricks free edition account. I will leave a link in the description so you can make that account and follow along. With that being said, let's jump onto my screen and get started. All right, so we're gonna get started right here on the dashboards. All we're gonna do is we're gonna come up here and we're gonna create our own dashboard. So we get started with this blank slate, and it has all these little arrows, and I recommend you read through these really quickly. But this is how you add filters. This is how we get our data, which is right up here, and I'll show you that in just a second. And this is how we actually add our visualizations to what they're calling our canvas. Let's come right up here, and let's go to our data. Now, within our data set, we are able to write SQL queries. And I will say this is one of my personal favorite things about this is you can write the query and then you can use that query to then create a visualization. We're going to do that in this lesson because I like being able to visualize and kind of see my aggregations when I'm doing some type of group by in SQL. I like to see what the actual output is, and you can really easily do that in here. You can also come down here and you can just come in and select some of your data. Now we are actually going to be using a sample data set. Everyone should have this data set. It's right here called the Bakehouse. And so we can come in here and we can also just select one of our data sets. When we select this sales transaction, it's going to start our warehouse. So now it's connected to our data and our serverless warehouse is running. So now we have access to this data. If I come right here, I click on these three dots and I can click add to dashboard. So I'm going to click add to dashboard. It's going to read in this as a SQL query. So if we go back up here, we now have sales transactions as one of our data sets. So we can just come in here and write it ourselves, or we can also come into the catalog and just select a data set and have it run it for us. Now, before we start actually diving in and kind of analyzing and visualizing this data, there are other ways you can actually analyze data. And we looked at this in a previous lesson when working with dataset, but as it pertains to connecting it to a dashboard, what we can do is let's come right up here and let's click on a notebook. Let's say we want to run that exact same query, and I'll just go back to the dashboard. I'm going to rename this really quick. I'm going to rename this as our transaction, if I can spell this right, dashboard. All right, so if I go to my data, I could just copy this, and then I can come right over here to the SQL editor, and we'll actually have access to our notebook right over here. So this is just our fresh notebook. We haven't used it. I'm just going to make this SQL just so you can see how easy this is, but we're going to run this exact same thing. We're going to get our output right down here. Now, let's say this is the output that we want. It isn't, but this is the output we want. But if we come right over here to these three dots and we scroll down, I can click add to dashboard. So I'm going to add this to my dashboard. I'm going to say add to existing dashboard. And when I click on this, I'm going to click on the transaction dashboard and I'm going to import this. This data is then going to be imported over as an untitled data set. We can rename this. I'm just going to say that this is from notebook. So this is our data from the notebook. It is the exact same query, as you can see, exact same data, but you don't just have to create your data from right here in the Create from SQL or in this dashboard tab. Now let's start actually working on our dashboard and kind of analyzing the data as we go. Let's just start by taking a look at our data. So we're working in the sales transactions. We have transaction ID, customer ID, franchise ID. If we scroll over to the right-hand side, we have the date and time that this transaction went through, the product that was purchased, the quantity, the unit price, total price, the way that they paid, and their card number. Now, this is not real data, so don't try to steal any of this card number, but we are going to be using this data to create our visualizations. Now, typically when I'm analyzing and then visualizing data, I have an end goal in mind. I know what I'm going to be doing with the data, and so I know how I need to analyze it. If I need to use a group by or a window function, if I need to clean the data or pivot the data, these are things that I'll know ahead of time. Now, in this lesson, we're going to keep it kind of simple, just learn how to build these things. But in the last lesson in this series, we're going to be building a full project. It's going to have really messy data that we need to dig into, but here we're going to learn a lot of the fundamentals. Let's start with that first bar chart that we saw earlier on. So we're going to come right here. We're going to go create from SQL, and let's call this one, let's rename this before we actually write it. We're going to call this one product sales descending. Now, what this means is we're going to take the product sales. So right over here, we're going to take the product, and then we're also going to look at this total price. So we're going to calculate the sales. This is actually going to be quite easy. If you know SQL, this should be pretty straightforward because you're just going to be using a group by for this. So I'm going to come right over here and I'm going to say, I want to take the product. So let's take the product, and I use tab for autocomplete here. So I'm going to do comma, then I'm going to do the sum, and then I'm going to take the sum of total price. And again, I'm just going to hit tab. So now that we have the product and the sum of total price, all we have to do is come right down here and say group by, and we're going to group by the product. And we should also order by. So we're going to order by, and we'll do total price, and we'll do that descending. And so all we're doing, and let's run this, all we're doing is we're taking the product and we're grouping it, and then we're taking the sum of all of that total price. And I actually need to order by the sum of total price. I just took the column itself, but in this query, we're using the sum of total price. Let's try running that one more time. Listen, it happens to the best of us. So now we have the product right down here, and we're ordering it based off the sum of this total price. Now I'm gonna leave this just like this. Although typically I would use an alias. I would say as, and I would say total underscore price or something like this, right? But I'm not gonna do that because I wanna show you in the dashboard how we can easily rename this. We don't have to use this column name. So now this data right here is ready for us to visualize. We can use this. So now let's come over to our untitled page and let's title this. We're gonna say dashboard. So we're just gonna name this dashboard, and we can get rid of these global filters for now, but we will need that in a little bit. Now you have all these options down here at the bottom. We have the move, we have add visualization, add a text box, add a filter, undo and redo. Now let's focus on adding a visualization first, and we'll worry about the text box later because we'll give it kind of a header of transaction dashboard. You don't have to, but we will for this dashboard. Now, when you first create a visualization, we're gonna have this widget on this right-hand side. This is where you basically build out your visualizations. We're gonna come in here and we're gonna select the data that we want. We just built this product sales descending. Let's go ahead and click on this. We do want this bar chart, but let's come in here and let's look at all these different options. There is a lot of different types of visualizations that we can create, and a lot of these are the ones that you'll use 99% of the time. So we're gonna click on this bar chart. Now we have to select the x-axis and the y-axis. In our chart, the axes are like this. We have two separate axes, and so we need to select what data goes on each of those axes. So let's select our x-axis. For this, we're gonna do the sum of the total price. And then for the y-axis, we're gonna select the product. Now this looks perfectly fine, right? I'm gonna expand this a little bit just for a second. This looks perfectly fine as is, but there's a lot of little things that we can do to make it a lot better. The first thing that I'm noticing is that I'm having a little tough time reading this. I'm saying, okay, how much is this one exactly? It's a little over 11,000, and if I hover over it, it'll tell me the exact number, but that's not good for a customer or somebody to see. I'm gonna add these labels, and now we can see it right away. So we don't have to kind of guesstimate, we can see the exact number. The next thing I'm noticing is that it's kind of all over the place. It looks like it's in alphabetical order here, but if you remember in our data back here, we had it in descending order based off of the sum of total price. So highest to lowest, that's descending. And I want that in our dashboard as well. All we have to do is we're gonna click on this. We're gonna go down to these three bars right above product, and then we're gonna click by x-axis, and then right here is the descending. So now we've ordered our data from highest to lowest. It's no longer alphabetical. Now there are some other things I want to highlight. We don't have to add these, but we absolutely can. First, let's add a title. So we're just going to call this total price by product. Keep it super simple. But we can also add a description. For example, let's say we wanted to add some context to this, or maybe we wanted to highlight that this is our biggest seller. So we can say Golden Gate Ginger is our highest selling product 8 years in a row. Now I'm just making this up. This isn't real. This is just as an example. But let's say we had some historical data and this is now showing, hey, this is still our best seller. And I just wanted to add that as some context. You can definitely do that. You don't have to, but you can. One other thing is let's take a look at these colors because we don't have to just keep these colors. We can also use a custom color so they can be, whatever color you think is best for your dashboard. We can also click on this plus sign and we can create some other options. Now, if we click on product, and this is one that I don't necessarily recommend. So each product is gonna get its own color on each row. It's a little bit redundant. Now let's go back over here. Let's get rid of our product and let's select our total price. Now we have this gradient scale from blue to white. This isn't my favorite. I actually prefer, if we come right up here and let's get the green blue. And so this is a great way to analyze and visualize at the same time. Sometimes you already know what you're gonna be building out, and so you can work with the data while you're building your dashboard. And now I can very easily see, I'm like, Golden Gate Ginger, man, that is our product. Like we're killing it with this product. But Richard Oasis, nobody likes that. It's doing okay, but it is our worst seller. Now, just remember, we use this product sales descending. And let's go take a look at this. This is the only data available to us in that visualization. Let's come over here and let's look at our sales transactions. We have our sales transactions right here. This is all of our data. And so there are times where we don't even need to write a custom query for each visualization. Let's take a look at this. So let's use our sales transactions to create a visualization in our dashboard. Let's come down here. Let's create our new visualization. And the next one that we're going to take a look at is payment type. So let's change this data set to the sales transaction. So now we're using two different data sets. Just note that for future reference, because that will come into play. But we're going to come down here and let's say we wanted to create a pie chart for the angle. And I'm just going to come down here. We're going to do payment method right here. It's going to give us a count, and we don't have to do count distinct. In fact, we probably shouldn't, because it's just going to give, if we hover over it, you're going to see 3, because there's only 3 options. But if we do a count and hover over it now, it's 3.33 thousand. So now we're going to be able to see how many transactions are using each payment method. Now for the color, this one is actually really important for a pie chart. Let's come in here and we want to do this based off of the payment method. We want to break it out. So we have this payment method. We have MasterCard, Amex, and Visa. Again, we can see the split based off of the color, but I really like labels. I think they're just super important. So I'm going to add these labels in right here. Now, this is an example where it says count of payment method right here on the dashboard. I don't like that. I mean, that's just by default. It's going to take the name of it, but I'm going to come in here. I'm going to change this display name. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this payment method breakdown. And let's change that. And that looks a lot better. It just doesn't seem so. I just tossed it in there. Seems like you intentionally named this dashboard. So we were able to go in to this sales transactions that has a lot of different fields, a lot of different columns, and we're able to just kind of pick out which one we want to use. So far, our dashboard is looking great. We're just going to build one last visualization, and then we're going to work on filtering. So let's come right down here and let's create one last visualization. And this is going to be our dashboard. So we're going to come in here. We're going to use sales transactions again. But this time, we want to see our transactions over time, right? We have this date column, and we want to use this. Let's use a line chart. And if we go back to our data, we have this date time. And this is really useful. We want to utilize this and see how many transactions are we having over time. Maybe there's a certain day of the week that people are just making a lot of transactions. This is really useful data for someone to know. So let's go back to our dashboard. And let's come down here to our x-axis. And for this, we want it to be our date column right down here. So we'll choose our date time. Now by default, it's going to select monthly, but you can come in here and you can transform this. It's going to take that date time column. It's going to be able to automatically change it to basically anything you want. So let's just choose daily for now, but we can change it later on. We just have to choose our y-axis. So let's click on our plus sign. In order to see our sales over time, let's take a look at our quantity. It's going to do the sum of quantity here. And if we go back just to check on this data, the quantity is the actual amount that we sold. So we sold 8, we sold 36, we sold 40. And so it's aggregating that data for us, which is really nice. If we come right over here, we can hover over this and we can kind of see each day and the sum of quantity. Now, again, we need to transform this a little bit because it's just sum of quantity, date, time, doesn't display the best. We want to customize this. We're going to just say date to keep it simple. And then for the sum of quantity, we're going to say quantity sold and keep it just like this. For our title, because I think this one may need one, we'll say quantity of sales over time. Right, there we go. Now, we have our dashboard built. It looks great. I'm super happy with this. One last thing we should add, and this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to add this title really quick. I'm going to call this our transaction, let me spell that right, transaction dashboard. And I'm going to format it just a little bit. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to increase the size just like that. You can change it to be a different color, but it just kind of adds a little bit of finesse to it, right? We can put that up and make this smaller. We can make this smaller if we want to go kind of that route, but it is up to you. The next thing that I want to show you though is adding a filter. Now, filters are quite important. Customers, clients, managers, whoever is using this dashboard are going to want to filter in some way. They're going to want to say, oh, I want to filter on this product, or I want to filter on this month or this year, whatever it is. And so adding a filter is really important. We can add a global filter right here. Now let's come over here to our widget because we do have the ability to change the type of filter. We can select multiple values. It could just be a single value. It could be a date picker or range picker, so a range of dates instead of just a single date. It could be a text entry where they're searching for something. Maybe it's a product. You can also do a range slider. Let's click on this range slider and let's come in here. We're gonna go down to the sales transactions and let's go down to the quantity. Now what this means is we've created this global filter on quantity. Quantity is a numeric data type. So we have this slider where we can basically say, hey, I only wanna see where the quantity was over a certain amount. So we have a picker where we can select a range for the quantity. Maybe we only wanna see the transactions that have a quantity greater than 30, for example. We would be able to do that in this dashboard. We can click in here and we can customize this. Maybe the minimum is 0 and the maximum is, let's say, 100. I'm just gonna set it for now. Let's come right over here. And let's say we only wanna look at it where it's greater than 30. So I'm gonna click on that. You'll notice that this doesn't actually change at all, but this one changed and this one changed. And let's just highlight that a little more. Let's kind of slide this around. And you'll notice that only these ones are changing, but this one is not changing. The reason for that is the data set that we chose. So let's come back here. Right up here, we have the product sales descending. And then if you go down here, we have our sales transactions and we have our sales transactions. But what are we actually filtering on? We are filtering on the quantity. And if you remember, let's go back to our product sales description. We don't have the quantity in here at all. And so this quantity is not connected to this data set. And so when we're applying this filter to this dashboard, it is not connected to this right here. Now, the way that we can fix that is we can replicate this exact dashboard. And this is what I was kind of talking about earlier, which is why we're gonna create a second dashboard. But we're gonna create the exact same thing, but we're gonna use the other data set. So now we're in sales transactions. We're gonna create our bar chart. For the x-axis, we're gonna do the sum of total price. And for the y-axis, it's gonna be the product. Let's find it right here. Let's scan this all the way over. Let's go down, add our labels, create our custom colors based off of the total price. And we'll change that coloring to be the green blue. And you can already see that this is filtered based off of our global filter right over here. So let's get rid of this. Let's just make it the same. And we actually need to do one more thing. We need to go like this. So now we have the exact same visualization, but this one is going to be connected to our filter. So this is a really important just thing to understand when you're building out these dashboards is people really like their filters. They want to be able to do that. And this is actually going to be a big thing that people request once you build your dashboard. You're going to build it out. It's going to be great. And they're like, hey, I want to be able to filter on this. I want to be able to filter on this. And so you're going to have to build that out. And you may have to go back and connect your data in certain ways to be able to accommodate certain filters. So that's just something to think about and something to know. But now this one is connected just like this. And so I would actually replace this one with this new visualization right down here because I want it to be connected to all of our other data for these types of global filters. Now, there are, of course, some other things that we could do. We can come in here and change some of these axes. We could add some more context in here. This is our sample data set. This is as far as we're going to go in this lesson. But like I mentioned earlier in the last video in this series, we're going to be building out a full project using real raw data. So we're going to have to do some data cleaning. We're going to have to really dig in and analyze our data and visualize and create our dashboard. The first one that we're going to be looking at is Genie. And Genie is built for business users to be able to get insight from their data just using natural language. Next, we're going to be using their AI assistant to help us code. So we'll be using that in the SQL Editor as well as the notebooks. It's going to help us generate code, but it's also going to help us diagnose and fix issues if we run into them. Next, we're going to use their AI assistant in the dashboards tab. So it's going to help us create visualizations. Now, what's so amazing is you're going to be able to try all these things completely for free because in Databricks Free Edition, you can use all of their AI tools completely for free. Be sure to use the link in the description to create your account so you can follow along and practice and actually use all these AI tools. With that being said, let's jump on my screen and get started. When you first pull up Databricks, we're going to need to come right down here within the SQL section to Genie. Let's go ahead and click on this. And this about sums it up for Genie. You can ask questions about your data in natural language. And that's what it is. It's just a way to converse with your data, ask questions about your data. Let's come over here. We're going to go to New. And we want to connect to a data source. We are going to use a sample data set. Let's actually go to All. It's within the samples right down here, this New York City data set. This is the data that we're going to be using for this video. Let's go ahead and create this. It's going to spin up our SQL warehouse because that is what we're going to be using to interact with this data. Now, while this is going and while it's just starting up, and we can get rid of this, we now have this data that sits right over here. Now, I'm just going to give you kind of an introduction to kind of this interface, but we're right here in this configure tab. We can come over here and we can create custom instructions for whatever we want this Genie to be. So if this Genie is supposed to be for a specific team or a specific project or whatever it is, you can give it these guidelines because then you can share this with other people and they can interact with it. So if it's people on your team who are interacting with a specific data source, then everyone can interact with that AI in the same way, and it's pretty cool. If we come right over here to settings, we can also name this. So I'm just going to call this one Databricks Genie Taxi. And I could add some description, but I'm not going to at the moment. Now, right over here, you'll notice in this space, we have a little bit of kind of prompting that is just, hey, here's some things that you can click on and we can give you that information. We can also add a sample question. So if you want to add one for your team or whoever you're working with, or just for yourself, you can add a question right here. Let's just go ahead and save this, and we're going to get out of here so that we have just this Genie interface right here. Now, as I mentioned before, Genie is really great for a business user, someone who's just going to be using natural language in order to ask questions about the data. If you are a more technical user, you're most likely going to be using the AI assistant that we're going to be looking at in the SQL Editor and the Notebooks. You can edit and dive into the code and get into the more programming side of Databricks. Let's just go ahead and ask it to explain this data set because we haven't taken a look at this data set at all. In fact, I don't even know what it looks like. It's just a New York City taxi data set. So it says here's where it's located. It contains taxi trips, including pickup, drop-off, trip distance, fare amount, and pickoff/drop-off zip codes. This is the only table in here. Now we can actually come over here to configure and we can click on this table and we can see a very quick kind of sample of this. But I'm gonna ask it to show me a sample of the data, please. I like to be polite when working with AI. You just never know. Right, I just want to make sure I'm being respectful here. So now it's going to give me a sample of our data. Now you'll notice right over here, we have this show code, and this is what it's going to do for basically anything. It's going to show us kind of what it's doing under the hood, which I really like. You can also edit in here. So if we want to come in here and we want to say, okay, let's limit it to 20 because we only have a small sample down here. Now we can run this again. And it's going to keep all this information, but we're now rerunning and kind of changing the code as we go if you want to do that. So now let's take a look just at our data really quickly. This is for taxi data. So we have a pickup time, a drop-off time, how long the distance was, how much it cost, the pickup zip, and the drop-off zip. So fairly simple data. Now there's a lot of things I could ask about this data set. I'm gonna keep it pretty simple. As we go further along in this video, we're gonna get a little bit more technical, a little bit more challenging to the AI to really see what it can do. So I'm just gonna say, what zip code are people being picked up at the most? So I just want to know where most people are being picked up. Maybe there's a specific zip code that 99% of these users are getting picked up at, and that would be really useful information. So let's see what Genie comes up with. So it says it right here. The most common pickup zip is 10,001 with 1,227 pickups recorded. Now you can see that right down here, but again, you have to remember that this is mostly for business users. And so I think it is good that they include this information up here just as a narrative that you can read. Let's go ahead and look at the code. So it looks like they're looking at the pickup zip, which is exactly what we would want to do. They're doing just a count of everything, and then they're grouping on that pickup zip as well, but then ordering it descending on the pickup count and limiting by 1. This is how I would have written it as well. This isn't anything crazy complex, but I think it did a really good job answering this question. Now, as I've been testing and working within Genie, it is pretty good with answering a lot of the questions about the data. Let's get a little bit more difficult with this one. So let's come down here and let's say, what time of day do most people get a ride? Now, this is kind of how I would imagine someone who's not very technical might ask this question, right? It's not very specific, and I'm curious as to how it's going to handle it. So let's see what code it writes and the output that we get. So it looks like it used the pickup hour. It says the highest number of rides occur at 1800, which is 6 p.m., with 1455 rides during that hour. Let's look at the code really quick. So it looks like it's using this hour right here within our date time. It's running a count. It's kind of filtering a little bit and grouping on this and doing kind of the same thing it did in our previous query. Now, Genie does have the ability to create visualizations as well. Let's see if it can visualize this. I'm going to say, can you visualize this? All right. It did exactly what I asked it to do. I asked it to visualize it, and it literally is visualizing the pickup hour and the count amount. This is not exactly what I had in mind. I actually wanted to see all the pickup times over time. So I'm going to ask it if it can show me all the pickup hours and the counts and visualize it. So I just went ahead and wrote that. I said, write a SQL query to show me all the pickup times and the counts, and then visualize it. Let's see if it's able to do this one, because the previous visualization was not exactly what I was hoping for, although it gave me exactly what I asked for. So it looks like it did this properly, and let's just look at this. They really are just doing the same query, but now they're not, filtering on it descending and then limiting it by 1. Now we have all of them, and whoops, let's go right down here. And now we have a visualization of this data. As you can see right here, this is our highest one. This is our 1800 or our 6 p.m. And so now we have this visualization. Now, the thing about Genie is it's kind of its own standalone thing. So if we want, we can come up here and we can copy this. So we can copy all of this and bring this over to the SQL editor. But again, that's not really the use case here. The use case is that a business user can come in here and ask questions about the data and get their questions answered without having to go into the SQL editor or a notebook or build a dashboard. So with that being said, let's come right over here to our SQL editor. And let's go right over here and let's take a look within a new query window. Let's take a look at the AI assistant that they have. Now, they have one right here, but you can also see a button right up here. They are both the assistant, but they are used in a different way. I'm going to demonstrate that in just a little bit. We're going to generate some code, but then we can ask larger context questions about the code and the data and revisions and insight into our data with our assistant up here, but we can't really do that with this one because this is purely for generating code. Let's go ahead and click on generate code. Now we don't have this connected to our data, so I'm just going to say, show me our New York City taxi data. And I'm going to ask it to generate this. Now, this is very generic. I don't even know if it's connected to this data. Let's just see what it does. It does not know exactly what data I'm talking about. And that's because we're in this workspace.default. I just wanted to see if it would be able to pick up on it, but it's not doing that. Let's click over here. Let's go to our samples. And for our schema, let's come down here to New York City. I'm going to accept this really quick because I want to demonstrate something. Let's go ahead and try to run this. It's not going to work, and that's okay. But what we can do is we can come right down here and we can say, let's diagnose this error. So let's click on the diagnose, and the assistant in the top right is now going to be activated. It's going to do this /fix. And so now it's going to say, okay, we need to use the proper schema. And even if we hadn't switched over, honestly, it would have picked this up. This assistant up here is slightly more context aware, I've noticed, than the actual code generation right down here. So now we can try running this, and we can run this right over here. And we're going to be able to see our data at the bottom. And I'm going to click this button in. It's going to say replace active query content. And so now I'm going to paste all this code right into this window. Let's get rid of this for now. And what we're going to do is I'm going to edit this code. So as you can see, it highlights all of our code. And I'm going to do two things. One, I'm just going to do this /, and we're going to get some options here. We're going to say /doc /explain. We have all these options, and it tells you what they do on this right-hand side. So we can explain the code, improve the formatting, optimize the code, replace parameters, fix errors in our code. There's a lot of different options, and they're just kind of defaults. And these are things that you can use really easily. We just fixed our code, so we're not going to do that right now. But what I'm going to ask it to do is do something totally different. Let's actually run our code really quick because I want you to be able to see the data in here. But we have two really useful columns, a pickup time and a drop-off time. And I'm going to ask it to calculate the difference between this and give us the average of those times. What's the average length of ride? It says the trip distance, but it doesn't tell us how long the trip took. So I'm going to go into the code. I'm going to say, I want the average time it took between pickup and drop-off. Now, this is a little bit more difficult. This is more difficult than anything we did in Genie. Let's see if it's able to write this code correctly. Now we can see what it's getting rid of with the red lines, and with the green lines, we can see what it's actually keeping. We can accept this either by clicking accept or clicking tab. I'm going to go ahead and click tab. And basically what it's doing is it's taking the drop off time and it's taking the pickup time, it's subtracting it, and then it's taking the average. And so we're just gonna go ahead and run this. And in seconds, that works perfect, but I don't want it in seconds. I want it in minutes. So I'm gonna edit this. I'm gonna say, I want the average to be in minutes, not seconds. It's gonna rewrite this and it's gonna divide it by 60, and that's really all it needs. Let's go ahead and tap this. Let's run our code. And now we have average trip duration in minutes. It's around 15 minutes. Now this is really great, but somebody who doesn't know what this is might be very confused. So I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna use one of these forward slashes and I'm gonna say add comments to code. So I'm just gonna hit enter. It's gonna start commenting on this code and I can click accept. It's just gonna say calculates the average trip duration in minutes by subtracting pickup from drop-off timestamps. Very simple, very straightforward, but it is really helpful for somebody who's gonna be coming behind you and reading this code. Now, as I mentioned before, this is for coding, but if you have other questions about the data, you can also come over here. So I'm just gonna say, tell me a bit about this data. Now, this is just kind of a really simple overview of the columns and kind of what's in it. It's pretty straightforward, but now let's ask it. We're gonna say, give me a simple data dictionary for each column. Now, I could have said for the whole data set. I don't know why I said column, but let's see what it gives us. And just like that, it is gonna give us a data dictionary, basically a description for each column. And this is really useful. It reads in the data and just gives you a little bit of information about what is in that data, as well as the data type and the column name. So this is really useful. Now, as I mentioned before, this isn't only in the SQL editor. We can also do this within a notebook. So let's come over here and take a look at the assistant within a notebook. You can see we have this generate, and it's gonna look very similar as it did before in the SQL editor. Now, it can do a lot of similar things. It's gonna generate code, but it can do it in different languages now. So we can do Markdown, Python, SQL, Scala, and R. By default though, it is in Python. So let's come over here. Let's go ahead and ask it to give us the sample New York City taxi data and just see what it comes up with. It looks like this one is gonna be perfect. Let's go ahead and run this. And this is gonna give us exactly what we want. We have our data right here. Now, one of the things that I wanna highlight is that what you can do, because when you're working within these notebooks, you can use whatever language you'd like. You can convert it to other languages. So let's come up here to our code. I'm gonna say, can you convert this to SQL? It's going to take this, which was a data frame, a spark.sql data frame, and it displayed it. It's now converting it to SQL right here, and then we're reading in just the SQL. Let's go ahead and tab this, and we'll run it, and we should get the exact same output. So that's one of the things that you can do in notebooks that, of course, you're not gonna do in a SQL editor because you're just using SQL. So that's how the assistant works within a SQL editor as well as a notebook. But let's head over here to our dashboards. Let's go and create a new dashboard. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull in that data that we were using before in our samples. So let's go to our catalog, let's go to our samples, New York City, and we'll click on this, and we're gonna say add to dashboard. So now we have this data right up here. This is our trips data. And what we're gonna do is come right over here, and we're going to add a visualization. The first thing that's gonna come up right here is the assistant. It said, ask the assistant to create a chart or to create anything that we want. And so let's ask it to create something really simple. I wanted to create a card with the average fare amount. And let's go ahead and run this. So I just wanted to show us the average price for one of their fares for the taxi. And there we go. So super easy, super simple. Now let's ask it a little bit more difficult question. Create a line chart with the count of pickup times. And let's go ahead and run this. Now it did do this, and what's nice is we have it right over here. It did this based off of the month. I'm gonna change this manually to the day so that we can see a little bit easier what days have a lot or have a little. And we're just doing a simple count on the pickup dates, that's it. Now with both of these, I didn't click the accept button, but once you do, once you click accept, and you can, of course, change it, it is going to stay there like you just created it as a normal visualization. Now, let's say I want to make a change to this. Let's come up here and say, change the daily, and I need to spell this right, daily to hourly. Let's go ahead and run this. And so there are going to be a lot of people, they don't know how to come in here or don't want to come in here. They can do this by just writing, change the daily to hourly. I'm going to accept this. Now this looks wild, but let's look at it. This is looking correct to me. Take away that global filter. And now we're looking at it hourly. And so we have a very, very accurate and specific view of hour by hour, the pickup times. And so this is how we can create different visualizations by just asking it. We can, of course, come in here because it's still using the exact things that we would use to create these. And so if we want to add labels, so I'm going to say add labels. I wouldn't on this data set. That's going to look terrible, but it's going to turn on the labels for you. And this looks horrible, but it did exactly what I requested. It's too granular to add labels. We would have to change this to probably weekly maybe, and add the labels for it to even make somewhat sense. There we go. So this looks a lot better, but we can do a lot of the things that we can manually do just using this. Now, if you already know how to create these visualizations just by memory, you won't need to use this all the time. But let's say you just can't figure out how to do it yourself, you can always ask. It is there to assist if you need it. You don't have to use it, but it can be useful if you're like, I just can't figure out how to create this. Let me just ask the assistant and see how they would create it. As you can see, there are a ton of ways that you can use AI in Databricks. You can use the Genie. You can use it in the SQL Editor with the assistant. We can also use this assistant up here, which gives a little larger context, and we can use it in the notebooks. So it's integrated into a lot of different places that you would use as an analyst or a scientist or a data engineer. Now, within this entire Databricks series, we've learned a lot of things, and we're gonna apply all of that into our final project. If you've never done one of my projects on this channel before, they can be a little bit long because I leave everything in. I don't cut out a lot of stuff. So if I make mistakes, you're going to see it so that you can learn from it as well. I will leave a link in the description so you can go to the Databricks free edition and create an account so you can follow along with this project. I will also have the dataset that we're going to be using in a GitHub. So all you have to do is go and download that dataset and you can import it and use it just like I'm doing. We are going to be working with real raw data, so we are going to encounter some issues and some things that we'll have to clean up along the way, but we're going to learn a lot, and this is what we're going to end up with at the final project. We're creating this United States emissions breakdown dashboard. It's going to be an awesome project, so I cannot wait to do this with you. Let's go ahead and jump onto my screen and get started. Now, before we jump into Databricks and actually start building out our project, I want to take a look at the data because there's a lot of data here. And when I say a lot, I mean, there's only 3,000 rows, but there's a ton of different fields. So if we start scrolling over, we're gonna see there's so many different things that we can work on. And I don't wanna focus on everything because it's gonna be impossible to get everything in there. I have highlighted with yellow the ones that we're gonna be working with. This is the emissions for megatons of CO2. We have our population, latitude, longitude, the county name, county state name, and state abbreviation. We're gonna be focusing on emissions, although there's so many other things we could look at in this data set, but we just don't have that much time and we don't have, days and weeks to comb through this and build everything out for, all the different scenarios and dashboards that we could build out. So this is the data set that we're going to be working with. Again, you can get that in the GitHub. Let's get out of this. And what we're gonna do is I'm right here. We are in our Databricks free edition account. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a new catalog. So I'm gonna call this one, I'm gonna say this is our emissions catalog. I'm gonna go ahead and create this. And now we're gonna have, let's get out of this. We're gonna have our emissions. And I'm gonna go under my default and I'm gonna come right over here and I'm gonna create a table. So we're gonna drop this entire thing into this. Let's go ahead and browse. And we're gonna come up here to emissions data 2023. Now, this data is large, may take just a second to bring it all in, but it's not like 10 gigabytes or anything. So we should be able to create this quite well. I'm gonna rename this to just emissions data because I think it looks cleaner. You can keep the 2023 if you would like, but I'm just gonna take emissions data. All right, so our data is in here. This all looks good. We are not gonna transform any of this, although we may need to transform some of it, right? But it's going to auto detect all of our data types. So, if we need to change something, we're gonna do that after the fact. We're gonna take it as it is with the raw data. Now all we have to do is come down here to create table, and it's going to create our emissions data table for us. Now it's going to give us some of this AI suggested description. This looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and just accept this just to have it in this data set, which is nice to have. Now, what I'm going to do is just give you the scenario, right? You were hired by the EPA to create a dashboard, and they want to focus specifically on emissions, but they want a breakdown of things like where it's actually coming from in the United States, where the most emissions are coming from. They want to see what states and counties are emitting the most emissions, as well as just in general, as a population, how much emissions do we have per person per area? So these are things that we're going to have to dive into. We're going to write some SQL queries in order to do this. Let's come over here and let's go to our SQL editor. Now this is from a previous lesson. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of these previous queries, and we're going to get started just with a fresh new query. And we will do this by selecting emissions and going to default, and it should be our emissions underscore data. Let's go ahead and run this. Now as our dashboard, that's going to be kind of our final product that we're going to hand off, I want to start with our location data because I personally am super interested in this. We of course have the state name and the county name, but that's not going to be as specific as something like latitude and longitude. And so I want to use this data along with our emissions data, and let's come right over here and find that. It's right here. So it's GHG emissions, mtons, CO2e. It's a long name, but that is the column that we want. So let's come right here. And instead of getting taking all the data, I'm going to do latitude. I'm going to do tab to autocomplete. We're going to do longitude, and let's see if it can find the CO2. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit tab, and I'm just going to call this as emissions. I feel like that's just going to be easier. Let's go ahead and run this, and there we go. Now, in terms of actually analyzing this data, latitude and longitude tends to be a little bit more difficult to work with in something like a county or a state because it is so specific. So you can't really aggregate on it. It's more of a visual thing. So let's actually just take this over. I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to bring this over to my dashboard, and we're going to create our new dashboard. Let's rename it really quickly before we get into data. I'm going to call this our emissions dashboard. As we build things out, we will then come and add to it. We don't have to do it that way. We could get all the data up front and then go from there. But I'm going to create from SQL, and I'm going to run this. And we actually need to specify where this is coming from. So let me get rid of this. I'm going to call this emissions.default emissions data. So I was just tabbing there. It got our catalog, then our schema, and then our table. And I just tabbed along the way. It makes it, kind of easy to work with. Let's go ahead and run this. And now we have our data right down here. Now, like I said, this isn't the easiest data to work with if you don't really know latitude and longitude data, but it's really easy to visualize. So let's come up here, and we are going to add, I'm going to get rid of our filters, but I'm going to add a visualization. And the data that we'll connect with is apparently called our untitled data set. Let me change this. So I'm going to rename this as our location data. We will use some other location data, but it's like state and county, and so we should be good. Well, let's use our location data, and what we need is actually a map. And we didn't do a map when we were creating and building dashboards in a previous lesson, so this is a new one for us. But let's come right down here. We're going to go to a point map. Now you can see we already have the coordinates available for us, longitude and latitude. So this should be really easy. We're just going to do, for the longitude, we'll do longitude. And for the latitude, believe it or not, this is going to sound insane, we're going to do latitude. Now, this is a little tricky to work with sometimes. It's kind of a double click. So I'm going to double click in, I'm going to double click in, and you can kind of scroll back. There are some things that we need to customize because this is just super blurry. I'm going to go to the size, and I'm going to decrease the size a little bit. I think that makes it a lot better. We can always, double click and zoom out just a little, just to have enough. I will say, if we zoom out more, you'll see some information right here. I think this is Hawaii. Don't cancel me if I'm wrong about that. Geography is not my best area. Then we have Alaska up here. So maybe we want to include all of that. That would be fine if we do, but I'm gonna come right in here. I think this is what I wanna keep, which is mainland United States. So we're gonna keep this. This to me is really useful and it makes a lot of sense. This is some of the most densely populated areas over here in the kind of the mid-east and the east. And then right over here, based on emissions, right? Emissions is much lower, even in California. There's a lot of people in California and on the West Coast, but not as many emissions. And so most of our emissions, just looking at our, our visualization, are over here on the right-hand side. Kind of centralized. What is this, like Ohio? Chicago's in Illinois. It's like Illinois, Ohio area. I'm not a geography expert. Don't hate. I don't know geography that well. So this is really interesting. I would not have guessed this, but this is official EPA data. So this is, pretty useful. Now, real quick, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to create our title. We're going to call this the United States Emissions Breakdown. And I need to spell this properly. Let's put this in the middle. Let's make it bold and we'll make it larger. We're not going to get crazy with it. Maybe we'll do one more. Let me see. That's too big. All right, let's go back to 24. Underneath it though, I'm going to add like some notes. We'll make it a lot smaller. We'll say this data was collected by the EPA. I'm going to say environmental. It's always tough to watch people watch me spell, by the way. I'm not good at it. Environmental Protection Agency. And then I'm going to say in 2023. I think this is fine for now. If we want to add something later to it, we can, or make it larger, or whatever we want to do. But I'm going to keep it just like this for now. Actually, I think I do want to make this bigger, or this part at least bigger. It seems like it should be. I feel like it should be bigger. That just feels better. I don't know why. Don't get onto me. Now, we can add more visualizations to this, and of course we will, but the first one, this one is probably the easiest one because we're not really digging into the data itself. We're more just trying to visualize it because latitude and longitude data is, pretty specific. Now let's come back over here to our SQL editor. I'm going to try using some AI here on this next one because the next one's going to be a little bit trickier, I think. Let's just create a new query because I think that's perfectly fine. But I want to make sure it's in the right schema. It is not. Let's go to emissions. Let's go to default. In fact, I could have just copied this over, honestly. So I'm going to come over here. Let's paste this in here. Now I'm going to edit this. I now want to focus on a new thing that we're looking at. I want to take a look at some data. Now I'm going to do this because this is what I personally do. I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to bring it back to the catalog and go to emissions, go to default, go to emissions data, and look at the sample data. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to just one click over, take a look at my raw data. You can also just create a query and tab over, but then I don't know. That's not my workflow. I like having a different thing for it. You can do that if you'd like. Just do, select everything from emissions data. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to use the AI. And what we're going to be looking at is I want to take a look at this county name as well as the population. So for each county, so this is in Alabama. This is the county state name. In Alabama, I want to look for this county and this population. Let's take a look at our emissions. But more specifically, I want to take a look at the emissions per person. So we're going to have to do a calculation here. So I'm going to ask the AI. I'm going to say, I want to look at the emissions per person in each county. Let's go ahead and generate this. Let's see if it will get exactly what I want. It may or may not. And let's accept this. I'm just going to hit tab. So we're casting this as a double, and then we're casting the population as a double, and then we're saying that's the emissions per person. Now this theoretically should work, right? But let's go over to our GHG emissions right here. Now here's the thing, and this is not, a Databricks specific thing, but this happens all the time in almost any platform, this is a number. This is 100% a number, has a comma in there, should be rendered as a number. But you can see right here, I can just tell you right now, this query is gonna fail because it needs to be changed. Let's go ahead and try to run this. Now, the reason why this is gonna fail is because this is a string. right? We have letters, we have characters that are not numeric in this column, and that is an issue. And so what we need to do is we need to convert this, or we can also in here ask it to diagnose this error. I'm going to see if the assistant can do it for us, because if it can, then that would be fantastic. Let's see if it's able to do this. This is kind of a specific fix. It needs to look into the data. And it looks like it got it perfect. It said you need to remove the thousands separator before you cast it. This looks excellent. Let's actually replace this. Let's get rid of that. And now let's try running this. And wait a second. We have latitude and longitude here. Let's go back, because I didn't want latitude and longitude in the first place. I was just looking at this and I got mixed up. Okay, that's fine. We'll keep this, but I am, before we even run this, I am going to say I don't want latitude. Did I spell it right? In longitude, I want the county and the population for those columns. I'm just using AI here. I could just fix this myself. I just want to test it because I think it's, an interesting thing. All right, let's accept this and let's go ahead and try running it and see what happens. All right, we're running into some issues and I'm just going to tell you that's going to happen, and that's okay. Let's take a look. One, I don't think we even have a county column. Let's go right over here. We have a county name column, which actually should be fine since we're not grouping on anything, but I actually want this column right here. So I'm going to copy this as the column name, and we'll come right back here. Population should be correct. And then we're working with a replace. I believe that we need backticks for this and not brackets. Let's just go ahead and try that and let's run it. All right, now this is working. Listen, AI is not perfect. Sometimes we got to step in and do what we do. So this looks correct to me. Let's take a look just really quick, because we are breaking it down by the county state name, which is what I would do. I wouldn't want to use this county name, because what if we have another county name that's Baldwin County, right? And when we start trying to visualize this data, then that could be issues, because it's going to probably try to group that data and it'll cause issues. Now, what we're going to do with this is we're actually going to look at the top 10 emissions based off of probably the emissions per person. I think that's all we should do. So I'm just going to add it this time. I'm not going to ask the AI. So I'm just going to say order by, and then I'm going to say emissions per person, and we'll do descending. And this should be really, actually, I should limit it by like 10 or something. I'm going to say limit 10. There we go. Now let's run this. And I'm super interested. This is real data, so, I'm really curious. So emissions per person, the population is only 5,000. They have a lot of emissions. That's in New England. This is in North Dakota, New England, North Dakota. Very interesting. So based off the emissions per person, these are the places, and this is not what I would have guessed. I would have guessed like New York or, I don't know, North Carolina or something like that. But we got New England and North Dakota. And then I think MO is Missouri. Don't quote me on that. But this looks good to me. This query was a little bit more challenging than our last one. I think you would agree. Let's bring this over. We're going to go back to our dashboard. I could also make this another tab. And it looks like that reset. We'll do that at the end. We'll just place that how we want it at the end. Now, what we actually need to do is put this in our data. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to place this in there. Again, it's not, it's right here, the emissions. We can change this so we don't have to do that. Let's go ahead and run this. And our data is working. Even though it's underlined, it's still reading it in fine. We do have it correctly done. We can always, like we did before, do emissions, and it shouldn't say emissions underscore data, emissions.default.emissions data. Just to get rid of those red lines, we can do that. Now we have our data down here. This is really useful. We don't necessarily have to even use this column, but we do have the population for emissions. And let's get rid of our limit, because I want to make a specific type of visualization with this. It's a scatter plot. Scatter plots are really great because we're going to be able to use the population and the emissions per person on a scatter plot, and kind of take a look. Hey, as the population increases, does the emissions per person increase as well, or does it decrease? A scatter plot would be great for this. Let's call this, let's do emissions per person. That's what we're going to call this one. Let's come over here, and we're going to come in, and we're going to choose our emissions per person. Now, on our x-axis, we can choose the emissions per person. We can switch this around, see which one works better. Then we'll also choose the population. Let's scroll down a little bit. Now we need to change this from a bar chart because that does not look right. We're going to change this into a scatter plot. Now for the scatter plot, we want the raw data. We don't want any aggregations. So let's say none here. And for the sum of population, none as well. That should be good. We can also really quick change the size because it's a little blurry. I want to see a little bit more granular of what we're looking at. We have this one up here. This emissions per person is 0.5. Okay, so that's low, but the population is 10 million. I'm curious where this actually is. Let's come down here to the tooltip. Let's add in the county state name. So now when I hover over it, and it's so small, now when I hover over it, this is Los Angeles County. This is actually really good. There is a very low emissions for that amount of people. And you can see that because it's over on this left-hand side. If we had something over here, this is not going to be good. This is one of our New England ones. They have emissions per person of 5.95, and that's in, I think, megatons. So that's a lot of emissions. Their population is 5.16 thousand. That's not a lot. That's a little over 5,000. They have a lot of emissions. So as you can see, the areas that actually have a higher population tend to have less emissions. Overall, I mean, these are Cook County, Harris County in Texas, Maricopa County in Arizona. But a lot of these ones are actually fairly low per person. In the areas that don't have a lot of people, they actually tend to look like they have higher emissions for the lower population. I mean, some, of course, are over here with very low emissions per person. It's just really interesting. I'm kind of looking into this as we go. Let's add this title. We'll say emissions per person. We'll say emissions versus population. And we could add some type of description. We don't have to, but I'm just going to say higher populations tend to have lower emissions per person. And we could go more in depth and add more notes that would be useful, but we're not going to. But I think that's really interesting. I'm kind of fascinated by that myself. So we have this emissions versus population one. Really quick, I'm going to add a title to this one. I'm going to say emissions per location. I'm just going to keep it like that. I think that's perfectly fine. Let's scroll down really quick. We're going to add in some more visualizations. I'm going to just put these here so that we can scroll down a little easier. But now we have these ones in here with us. Let's come back to our SQL editor and let's add a new tab. So I'm going to say a new query here. Now what I want to look at is the total emissions by state. Because I want to see what states are just doing the worst. They have so many emissions. They're the top 10 worst states in America. I wouldn't say that. That's a bit extreme. We will need to reuse this really quick. We're going to have to reuse this replace. I'll just copy this over. In fact, I feel like I can write this quite quickly if we were in the emissions default here. What we need to do is we need to come over here and let's see. So I don't want to have to take this and break it out by the state over here. We have the state abbreviation. So let's use it. Let's copy this column name. Let's bring it back. And all we're going to do is just keep the state abbreviation. We don't need to do any of these calculations. We should be able to get rid of all of that. And let me see what I'm doing wrong here. Okay, it looks like I have an extra parentheses. And then we're just going to say total emissions. That should be fine. Then we need to group by. So we're going to say group by because if we look at our data, we have a lot in Alabama, right? We have a lot of counties in each state. So we have to group on this state abbreviation. And then I'm not going to go over to it, but then we're going to group and do our sum right here. right? And we're gonna have to actually do the sum in just a second. So we're gonna say group by the state abbreviation. And there we go. And we'll take this. And then right up here, we just need to do the sum. So I actually did need that extra parentheses. I got rid of it. I was so short-sighted. I got too excited. And we'll keep the top 10 actually, because I know that when we start visualizing this, we're not going to need all of them. Although it would be, let me just comment this out for a second, because I am curious to look at all the states and see which one has the highest. So the total emissions is Texas, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, Georgia. You know, that's a lot of the South and Southeast and not a lot from the West Coast. Let's come down here. We have Vermont, Richmond, AK, is that Arkansas? DC, ME, Maine. So actually some of the Northeast is actually quite good with New Hampshire. But then the West Coast and kind of the Midwest tends to be really low emissions, probably because their populations are lower, but I guess maybe not because of what we looked at earlier. Anyways, let's limit this by 10. And then I'm going to copy this over. Yeah, we'll go back to our dashboards. Let me go back to the emissions dashboard. Let's scroll down. And actually, we got to go to the data first. Let's create this and we'll run this. I need to have our emissions and our default. That should be good. Let's run this data and then I'm going to rename this. I'm going to say total emissions per state. That should be good. So now we have these. These are our top 10. What I actually want to look at this for is percentage-wise. We're going to have to do some other analysis because I do want to add something that you can't necessarily visualize. We're just going to have to dig into that in the data really quickly and perform a little calculation. It's nothing crazy. But we may use AI for it. We'll see if it can work for us. We'll do total emissions by state. And we're going to do a pie chart right here. Now for the angle, all we have to do is the total emissions, but we want to break it out. Our color, we want to break it out by these state abbreviations. We definitely need to add the labels here. Let's add our labels. There we go. And it has it over there. So we have this little legend right down here. We have Texas, that's 20% in the top 10. That's in our top 10. These are the total emissions. If we tried to add all of them, which, you know what? Let's just go try it. We can get rid of these 10. We can do that. Let's run this. We'll have all of our data. Let's go back to our dashboard. And now we have all of them. So it looks like Texas is 10%, but that is a lot, right? We have a lot of different colors and it's really hard to see almost anything, if I'm being honest. If we want to, and maybe this is a good thing to do, is we can add a filter right here. And I haven't done this at all in this video yet, but I'm just gonna say maybe a range slider might be good. For the field, we can do, let's see, total emissions per state. We'll look at the total emissions and let's see if I can just kind of scroll up and do something like this. That might work. But then again, it's then, only doing the calculation or the percentage based off of that. So we're just reinventing the wheel here. I'm just demonstrating it can be done, but I don't think we need this. All that being said, we're actually gonna delete that. But that's okay. Let's go back. We're gonna add the limit 10. Listen, I'm here for education purposes, right? I want you to know what you can do. If you want to do that, you can, but we're not gonna do it. Let's go back here. Now we have this. This looks good, but I don't like this title. Actually, let's get right here. I'm just gonna say emissions percentage or something like that is fine. Feel like that's good enough for like a title even. We can, and I think we should, come in here and add some type of description, some information here. So I'm just gonna say the top 10 states account for X amount of emissions for all of the US. Now I'm saying X amount because we don't have that information yet. We actually need to write that query. Let's go back to our SQL editor and let's dig into this. I am going to try to use this assistant because I feel like it might be able to understand what I'm doing. I'm going to paste this in and I'm just going to say, I want to know what percentage, I need to write this right, but what percentage of emissions are the top 10 states for the whole country. And let's see if it understands that. I don't know if I even wrote that well, but let's see if it did. If it does. This is a CTE it's writing. I'm just going to see what it's writing. It's writing a CTE. It's calculating the top 10, and then it's selecting the sum of the total emissions. Okay, this could work. Let me take this query real quick, and I'm actually going to open up a new tab or a new query. And let's make sure, oops, I need to get all this. Oh, it's doing it for a notebook. That's all right. I'm going to get rid of that because I'm going to come down here to emissions, to default. Let's paste this in here, and this may work. Let's run this. Okay, so this is the top 10 emissions. This is the top 10 percentage. I believe this is correct. You can validate this, but what it's doing is, we don't need this SQL here. What it's doing is creating a CTE, calling it the top 10. Then we're selecting the state abbreviations. We have this query. It's taking the total or the sum for the top 10. And then we're using that later on. So now we're doing select, and this is the sum of the total emissions from up here. And then we're taking the sum of the total emissions divided by this number right here, which is all of them. Now, wait a second. I may be wrong on this because we're only pulling from the top 10. So maybe it's just looking at the total emissions from up here as top 10 emissions. It's taking the sum of the total emissions and then selecting the sum from emissions data. No. You know what? No. It is taking it from, it's doing a subquery in here. I missed that. So this subquery is actually selecting all of the emissions from the emissions data. This is great. I'm going to say it accounts for 51%. This is a great job, AI. I'm glad it did a good job. I think I am going to add, make a duplicate of this. That's my personal workflow. Okay. So let's come in here and we're going to say that this accounts for, the top 10 account for 51%. Let's make sure I spell this right. The top 10 states, I'm actually going to say these 10 states. These 10 states account for 51% of all emissions. I'm going to say of, what am I doing? Of all emissions in the US. I'm having a tough time writing. That is a useful statistic. That is a really useful statistic. So I think this one is done. I think this is a really good visualization. Look, pie charts have its place. Percentages like this, I think are really useful. Let's come back. Let's go to our SQL editor. I'm going to have that over here. So I'm going to have my SQL editor, emissions dashboard, and the data. Now, what I want to do is I want to name and shame a little bit, okay? I want to take a look at the county state name. What specific county, and we kind of looked at this earlier when we were getting our population data because we had to ground it with a group by and something, but now we're actually using the county state name. We're going to take a look at the top 10 counties within the US, and we want to create a bar chart for this. So let's use this. Let me come right back here. This was by far the hardest query that we've written today. AI did well. We gave it a lot of the context, but I think it did a good job. Let's bring in some of our previous, this was a really simple thing here. Actually, let's use this because it has a lot of the information we're already wanting. Now, all we're doing is we're just looking at the total emissions, not per person. So let's get rid of this. we're literally just looking at it like this. So we have the county state name. Let's go to emissions default. We have the county state name from emissions data, and we don't have to do this. We need to do it. Let's close this parentheses and call this as total emissions. And then we have to use this alias for this part to order by it down here. We don't have to technically. We could just copy this whole cast and replace, but we're not going to. So now we want to look at the top 10. So this should work. Now we have the county state name in Arizona, Texas, Illinois, Florida. Geez, just so many emissions. You know, think of the world. Think of your country. Let's come in here. No, we need to go back to the data. Let's create from SQL, and we're going to put this in here. Let's go back to our emissions. Let's run this. This should be good. Awesome. So now we have the highest total emissions right here. I mean, listen, even though Los Angeles County is in the top 10, it's because their population is 4 times as much as some of these. I mean, it's really interesting. That's why we did the emissions per person earlier, because there are outliers and, you know, the total population does matter. Let's come in here and we're just going to rename this county shaming. All right. That's what we're going to call it, because that's what we're doing. Let's be honest. All right. We're just going to make a bar chart. We're going to go to the county shaming. We're going to use a bar chart. For our x-axis, let's use total emissions. Then for our y-axis, we can use the county state name. And I do want to look at that from highest to lowest. So let's do it like that. We can change the coloring if you want. I definitely want tooltips, or not tooltips, sorry, labels. I definitely want labels on this. This is just our total emissions in like megatons. So I'm going to say that. I want to add a title. I'm going to say total emissions, I gotta spell right, emissions by M ton, I think, of CO2. And I wanna make sure that's correct. Because listen, this dashboard, I'm gonna send this to the EPA right away. So we have M tons of CO2. Maybe CO2e, I don't know if I should be putting that in here. Let's add that. All right. This looks great. Let's adjust this real quick. I'm actually going to come over this way, double click, come out a little bit. This is something that I just have not gotten the hang of. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but let's click in on this and have that right there. We need to bring back our emissions versus population and bring this up. Now, what did I do here? Oh, I think I might have clicked on, yeah, I zoomed in. Whoops. Don't mind me. Listen, I make mistakes all the time. I want to clean this up just a little bit. Things like the total emissions. I just want to say total emissions, right? I'm cleaning up these X and Y axes. I'm going to call this the county name. Maybe I should say county state name, I guess, to be more accurate. That looks good. Emissions, this one looks good. Here we need, oops, let me zoom out. We need to rename this one, emissions per person. We're gonna call this emissions, oops, did I spell that right? Emissions per person. That does not look right, but maybe it is. And I'm gonna change this population to be capitalized. I think it looks better. Population. And let's see, emissions per location, emissions versus population. I actually should say emissions, where's the title here? Oh, I gotta do it up here. I'm gonna say emissions for continental US. Did I spell that right? No. Continental US. My spelling is so terrible, but we're only looking at the continental US here, so that might just be worth noting. We are done. We are done here. We have our United States emissions breakdown, and I think this looks great. We dug into some of the data a little bit deeper than we probably needed to, but I think this was great. And we were able to use AI and build out our dashboard. I am super happy with how this turned out. Remember, this is a real data set. There's so much other data in here. So if you want to, you can use the assistant in here and say, hey, what other things can I look at for emissions? And it'll give you suggestions. But this is what I wanted to build because I was super interested in it. And emissions is just, something that everybody understands. People are curious about it. And so visualizing it, being able to see it and kind of shame some of these counties that just got so many emissions, but it's worth it. It's worth building out. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you found this helpful. Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this entire series, and that was Databricks. Databricks has been so awesome to work with because I already love Databricks. It was an easy fit. And what's even better is they have this Databricks free edition. If you have not already, if you just watched through this without following along, create a Databricks free edition account. Go ahead and do that. I will leave a link in the description so you can build something like this completely for free. It is an amazing, amazing deal. With that being said, thank you guys so much for following along through this entire project. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. If you have not already, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.